So I'm talking about the person who was the first Rambo, and be sure that he was not Sylvester Stallone, somebody else. But the story is about the Finns in the North America since 1638, and 1638 New Sweden was founded in Delaware. That was the beginning of the Finnish immigration to North America, not to USA, North America. And then I will talk about the new Finns here in USA, and that's why Silicon Valley is over here. Somebody told us that he or she will visit Turku. Yo. So you're very welcome to Institute of Migration. It's in downtown of Turku, and that's a big house, and the number of people working there is about 25. So we have archives over here, and exhibitions, and researchers are working here. And so. But let's go to the business. Who was the first Rambo? I have 6 topics, and first I will talk about the Swedish kingdom and a very short story about the history of Sweden and how Sweden was connected with Finland 500 years ago, and it's very important to know this history because it's closely connected with New Sweden. The first Finns came here 1638, and they were the Finns living in Sweden. Who knows the name John Morton?
I don't think they understood. John Morton.
John Morton. 2 persons here, okay. And then I talk about John Morton, and then American Fever, and American Finns Today, and tomorrow, and some special features, and it takes about 45 minutes. And questions are welcome, please, if you are interested in so. Very shortly. This is Finland today, between Russia and Sweden. But the story begins here 1323, when Finland was first time mentioned in some kind of agreement, Pähkinänsaaren rauha. And Sweden was over here, Russia and Novgorod was over here, this green area. And first time Sweden took over Finland. And you see that Sweden was getting east all the time, and so little by little Finland was a part of Sweden, Swedish kingdom. There is nothing here. But when we talk about this history, we have to know that there are 3 or 4 tribes, Hämäläiset are the tribes. They are proper Finns or West Finns living over here. We call these Häme Tavastia, people are living over here, Savonia people over here, and Karelians over here. So when Sweden and Denmark had some kind of problems in this area here in Värmland, this was very empty area. No any kind of people living here. So Swedish king was thinking that we want to keep this area. And Danes were very interested in to come to Sweden, and that's why Swedish king Gustav Vasa decided that he will invite some people from Finland to Värmland and to be settled here, these people over here. So we don't have any fact what is the number of these Savonians from this area to be settled over here. But we have estimated that the figure is about 10,000 up to 15,000. There is a figure here mentioned that 10,000 up to 12,000, but we don't have any exact figures, but it's about 10,000 Savonians. We call them Savonians, Savolaiset. They are settled to live here. These people were very, very poor people, and Russians visited many times this area, and these people were very boring to fight against the eastern enemies, and that's why they were very pleased to move here to Värmland area. We call them forest Finns, or Värmland Finns. This area has been called Värmland. So it was no anymore empty area. Now the Finns were living there, and Danish king was a little bit disappointed. But anyway, so the Finns were living here from 1560 up to 1850 or something like that. And these were very poor people. And we call them forest Finns, these Värmland Finns. And I don't know if you know the word slash and burn technique. So it was wonderful forest in Värmland. And when the people came from Savo to Värmland, in Finland they used that slash and burn technique. And it was very uneconomical system to cultivate. And that's why Swedes were very angry that you waste our forest. And then there were some mining areas also in Värmland. And thus, when the Finns had lived about 50 years in Värmland, so the Swedes expelled the Finns from the area. They were moving to Gothenburg, to east, and then also to Norway. But we have to know this story about these Savonians, Savo people, and Värmland's forest Finns when we talk about New Sweden and how it was settled. So New Sweden, we call it Swedish Delaware colony, and these are the years 1638 up to 1655. But we have to know that there were a lot of Swedes before that year, 1606, 1607. There were Swedish traders and hunters in Delaware area, and so the information from this empty land, it was empty because there was no white people living there. There were only Indians. So we can take it, and Swedish trade company was created and founded in Sweden, and then this company came to Delaware area 1638. And because this area was very useful for Swedes, the Finns were kicked out, and they had to, the Swedes had to do something. So the idea was that, okay, now we need more people in New Sweden, and what about if the Finns will go to Sweden? And the population of New Sweden was 1,000, and 50% of these settlers were Finns. And then 1655-56, Dutch army took over the New Sweden. So the time was very short when the Sweden had this settlement in North America. But and 11 trips was made from Gothenburg to New Sweden in Delaware. Dutch men or Netherlanders, they had a settlement in New York area, Manhattan area, and New Sweden is south of New Amsterdam, as it was called at that time. And who has seen this replica? This is the copy of the original ship, and it's very wonderful. You will see the, I don't know, maybe American flag in Swedish, Swedish ship. But this replica was made in Delaware. There's a society in Delaware, they made this wonderful replica, and you will see Finnish flag, Swedish flag, Dutch flag, and the society flag over here. This replica is working very well. It has she has a very small engine over here.
So where is it then stored, this, in Delaware?
In Delaware, yeah. Oh. There's a Swedish club in Delaware. And they constructed this. It's about 100 feet long, this ship. And when this Kalmar Nyckel came from Sweden or Gothenburg to Delaware area, the crew was 20 sailors, 20 soldiers, and 100 friends. So
You said it's 100 feet long. It seems like
it's
lots of people in a
yeah,
small
it's 35 meters long.
Wow.
So it's very, very short. Go over the Atlantic.
140 feet.
Yeah. It happened shipwrecks in Trinidad. So we know that some 100 people drank. So, but anyway, the ship Kalmar Nyckel came from Gothenburg to Delaware area 11 times, and here is the New Sweden area, and Christina Fortress is over here. But Finns were not interested in living in fortress. They wanted farming land, they want to be farmers, and that's why they were living over here. They had farms over here. Indians, Native Americans were living over here, and Finns had a very good contact with the native people here. And all the farm names are Finnish names. Look up here. Martti Marttinen, Juho, Eskon poika, Heikin poika, Niilon poika. So all these are Finnish farmers from Sweden, from Värmland. And Fort Christina is over here, and Swedes were living over there, and Dutchmen over here. And Martti Marttinen is a very important name here because John Morton, who was the signer of the Declaration of Independence, Martti Marttinen was his great-grandfather. Martti Marttinen. And John Morton was a very prominent Finn, and Martti Marttinen was one of the settlers coming from Gothenburg to New Sweden. And in Swedish documents, Martti Marttinen is also known as Morten Mortensson. So you have to know the difference between Morten Mortensson is also Martti Marttinen. Marttinen, Mortensson, Morton. And you see that Martti Marttinen was born 1606, and when he died, he was 100 years old. Somebody told me that 99. There's no difference between. At that time, it's a very, very, very old man. And Morten Mortensson Jr., John Morton Senior, and then John Morton Jr. And this man is over here. So, before signing the Declaration of Independence, all the 13 colonies have to be unanimous. And Pennsylvania, Morton was from Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania was very divided. And Morton was first against this independence idea about independence, but then he changed his mind and he decided that also the Pennsylvania delegation has to be pro-independence. And when Morton changed his mind, so little by little the Pennsylvania delegation decided that okay, we can sign the declaration. And here is John Morton signing the declaration. Benjamin Franklin, you know the name Benjamin Franklin. He was very much against this independence, but John Morton was discussing with him several times, and then Benjamin said, okay, let's go. And here is John Morton and his name over here. So you see that Finland and Finns had a very important role in your independence. But who was the first Rambo? And what is Rambo? And how was the name Rambo born? If you have been in Gothenburg, I have been working there 2 years. So, this is downtown. This is a modern chart, but this is Gothenburg, downtown, and here is the old Gothenburg, as we call it. And over here you will see Ramberget, which rock opposite of this downtown, and Ramberget is about 100 meters high. That's about 300 feet. Sometimes there was a village named Ram over here, which is not anymore, but Ram and Ramberget. So the old Swedish word Ram or Rom, this is Scandinavian, old Scandinavian words, means raven in English. And Bo means inhabitant. Ram Bo is a person who has been living in the village Ram. Understood? Mm-hmm. So Rambo is a person who is living or was living in the village Ram. And somebody was coming to Turku. Turku is in Swedish Åbo, Åbo. Someone who has been living in close to river. Å is river in Swedish. So, and Peter Rambo was one of the first settlers in New Sweden. So the first Rambo was Peter Rambo, alias Peter Romppainen, a Finn. So this story is true. I was in New York. I had some meeting 15-20 years ago, and I was in a hotel, and I opened the phone book, New York phone book, and there are a lot of Rambos over there. I called this lady, Paula Rambo. Do you know your background? Do you know your heritage? And this lady told me in the phone that, yeah, I know that I have some kind of Scandinavian roots, but she didn't know anymore that much. But so Rambo there are about 55 Rambo families in New York. But Rambo apple is very famous in New York area still. If you go to the groceries and ask, do you have Rambo apples? So in New York you will have it. It's a very small apple from Savo. the people from Savo, they took these apples with them when they were moving to Värmland, and then from Värmland to Sweden. Rainbow apple.
Okay, Peter Appleseed,
Yeah.
like a Johnny Appleseed is down here.
Now, very shortly, American fever in the 19th century. The number of Finnish immigrants in USA was about 300,000. And at that time, the number of population in Finland was about 3 million, so 10% of Finns moved from Finland to America. And it seems to be a very, very big number and big share, but that is not true, because from Norway, about 1/3 immigrated to USA.
Wow.
And from Sweden, 20%. From Ireland, 45, maybe more. So, from Finland, 10%. So. But why the figure is that small is that the reason is that the peak of the American fever came very late to Finland. The peak is over here 1902, and at that time the Russification was very strong in Finland, and that was one reason. We are not Russians, we are Finns, and then that's why they were leaving Finland for USA. And this peak took place in Sweden 20-25 years earlier, as well as in Denmark and Norway. So the Scandinavians came 25 years earlier compared with the Finns, and when the Finns had American fever, there was no free land in the States anymore. So the only place and only work you can do is mining work and logging. Very, very hard work, and that's why America's reputation in Finland was not that high. For example, my grandfather was 20 years working in USA, but then he
Came back.
returned, he returned back home from New York. And there's several differences between Finnish and Scandinavian immigration, because the Finns were working, they were labor force, and among Finns, socialist radicalism was very, very common, and among the Swedes and Norwegians, different kind of, if there were radicalism, it was church radicalism, but not political radicalism. So there were many differences between Finns and Scandinavians. This is Calumet. Who has been in Calumet? There are 7 churches over here. So Finns were divided into socialists and church people, and then church people were divided into different.
Just like there are so many political parties in Little Finland.
Yeah, not that much, but the Finns in Calumet area, they were members of IWW and so on, and American Communists and American Socialists. But anyway, Calumet is a very small village nowadays, maybe 1,000 people living there, but 100 years ago in Calumet was about 100,000 people working there. And Hancock.
But they have an opera house. We had an
And still
opera house.
has.
Yes, yeah,
Probably
Caruso was
theaters, I'm sure they had
Yeah.
lots of theaters.
yeah.
Yeah. Caruso visited many times in Calumet Opera House.
We had 3 different Finnish churches and just in Berkeley, so that's like
Yeah.
Right,
just in North Berkeley.
just few Finns together and they have to form
They are-
each of their own.
There is Finnish Lutheran Church, American Finnish Lutheran Church, and so I don't know what's Jehovan todistajia in English. And,
Jehovah's
Hellman.
Witnesses.
Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, something like that. So, very shortly, the American fever came to Finland very late compared with the Swedes and then other Scandinavians, and the share of the population was smaller in Finland. And then some words about the American Finns today and tomorrow. This map is 2012, about 5 years old. So Finns are the biggest ethnic group in several counties in Upper Michigan, UP. And there are several counties where the Finns are still as the biggest ethnic group. And Norwegians are here. German are here, this yellow. But where are the Swedes? There is no any county in USA where the Swedes are the biggest ethnic group. So Swedes are so integrated into USA. That's very funny. Norwegians are still over here where they settled first time as well as Finns, but Swedes were moving this area and there, and then they second generation was moving to Chicago and New York and so. The Swedes are part of the mainstream, American mainstream in some way, but Finns and Norwegians are not in that sense. And here we have some figures about the Finnish roots and Scandinavian roots in USA. According to the latest census, 800 Americans said that I have Finnish heritage. Danes, 1.6 million, Swedes, 4.5, and Norwegians, 5. So that's very funny because the number of Finns migrating to USA was 300,000, as well as Danes, and about 1 million Swedes and 1 million Norwegians were moving. So this figure is very, very high. And the question is why this figure is so low? Do you have any explanation for that?
I do. It's a wild guess though, because Finnish is such a bizarre language that for Swedes and Danes and Norwegians it was easier to mingle just because of the Germanic language thing, and maybe Finns just kept to themselves and many left, maybe.
Change their names.
Possible.
That's all.
Yeah.
What was the original number of immigrants from Finland?
300,000.
Yeah, so it's triple almost that. Now people claim
Yeah,
America,
that's
so
correct.
if it's,
But the figure was the same among Danes.
yeah, I mean, it's not so different from for the
What, more
Swedes.
kids?
But they came later, so they didn't have time to
I
multiply.
have one theory, but I don't know if that's true. If your kids and your kids, you are Swede and you are Finn, they will get married and they have children, they will say that I have Swedish ancestors, no Finns, because they had a better reputation in USA. What do you think about that?
Yeah, makes sense.
Well, there's also such thing as dumb Swede.
Okay, but if you think about the modern days immigration, so here you will see the Nokia effect here in USA. And Nokia was in power 2005, so so there were a lot of people having permanent resident status, or they were naturalized here, but then the time of Nokia was over, so the figure is lower. And you will see that California is very popular among Finns as well as among Swedes, not that much of among Norwegians and Danish immigrants. There are a lot of Swedes also in New York, and so it means that because Swedes and Norwegians nowadays are very business-minded, so they are working in New York, and Finns are working a little bit more with computers, so that's why California is important for this field. But if you think about what is the figure today when we talk about all Finns staying here longer or shorter time here in USA. So according to the latest figures, 171,000 Finns visited USA. But if you look at these Scandinavian figures, they are almost double. So I don't know what's the reason. So one reason that Finns are not that much working today in USA is that European Union is very attractive for Finns today, and especially Sweden. A lot of younger Finns are studying and working in Sweden today. For example, our son, Mikko, was working 10 years in Sweden, as well as her wife. But what about the future? What is the role of Finnish-US migration in the future? There are a lot of question marks. For example, Brexit, if and when UK will be out of the European Union, maybe that means that a lot of Finns or some Finns will move to USA instead of England. We don't know. What is the role of this American tough immigration policy? We don't know. We have some facts. For example, my wife is in conference now in San Francisco, and the Finnish delegation originally was 2 months ago. It was 20-25, but 16 people came. All the Asians and Arabic background. Having Arabic background, they were staying at home. They don't want to come here. So that's a fact that America will pay about the Trump policy.
It's also, I looked at the UC system jobs, and I saw now for the first time, and I've been looking at these jobs for 10 years occasionally, I saw for the first time that there was a job opening that stating the departments won't help with visa or green card issues. So it's also, it was the first time, and I was fairly surprised.
Wow.
Yeah, it's the same thing at it's a UC system. So
Yeah, I've been visiting here once a year, and first time the ESTA visa form was a little bit changed. So something will happen here, I don't know, but let's see. It depends on you.
Yeah.
But what about the Finnishness here in, who knows Karpelonpää? Carl was retired about 2 years ago, and he was the last person having own Finnish TV show, and his TV show took about 45 years. It was he's a very famous comedy, nice guy, and he's about 89 years old now. And then he retired. There's no any more Finnish TV shows in Finnish here in USA.
So he was in the Finnish country or like the peninsula or?
Peninsula. The TV show was
UP.
sent from Marquette, UP. You know these FinFests here? So if the FinFest will be organized in UP or Minnesota, there are about 5,000 participants, but if it will be organized in Arizona or in Texas or somewhere else, so California, maybe 1,000 persons.
So this the next is in September in Minneapolis.
Once again.
That's where the Finns are.
I was taking part in the first FinFest, early 1980s. Also in Canada, I've been visiting. So Finnishness slowly wanes here in the States. And the history of the Finns is very well known here. If you look at this brochure, so you will see that here there is several books on American Finns and their history. But we are in Finland, we are interested in Finnishness in the States and in America. There is no question about that. And I will say some examples. Do you know the concept utopian settlements? So there are a lot of different kind of utopian settlements here in North America, as well as in Cuba and in South America. I have visited in all of these settlements, and I was in November in Itabo in Cuba, and I found some persons having Finnish background. And do you know, or somebody knows the name Väinö Hoover? Väinö Hoover. His family was living in Itabo, but they returned back to California, and Väinö founded an electric firm, and he had 66 patents in electronics, and the first Apollo satellites landed in the moon. They were using his instruments in landing. But Väinö Hoover was very, very prominent man, but all the moon, all the NASA patents are military patents. They are not open for everyone. So it's very difficult to know something about Väinö Hoover and his role in Apollo project. But we know that he was a very important man when the first Apollos landed in There are, of course, some settlements here in Berkeley area, but they are not utopian settlements, because if there is a utopian settlement, the common ideology is needed, a strong leader is needed, and common rules are needed, and you will find these preconditions here, but not here in Berkeley area. And I was in Cuba looking for the Finns, and I found some materials. Here's the Saastamonen family and so on. But who know the concept Findian?
Yeah.
So this is a very good book if you can read Finnish. This is, I suppose that this will be translated into English now, but I'm not so sure. But the concept Findians and these ladies make research on this topic, and they were interviewing Findians in Minnesota and Michigan, and this is something we didn't know that much in Finland. When I was working in Ann Arbor, late 1980s, I have some small understanding that there are concept Findians, but we didn't have any fact about that. But now we have. So we are interested in utopian Finns in USA and in America, Findians, and Jari Jaakkola, who is very famous in Minnesota nowadays, because she and her tribe is demonstrating against oil pipes. And then we are interested in war veterans and different special stories. Irman tarina, Irma's story is very moving story. She was born in Canada, and the family moved from Canada late 1920s to Karelia, and the whole family was killed except Irma, and then when Soviet Union collapsed, she came to back to Finland, and she died some months ago. She was 94 years, and she had 4 passports. Canadian, Soviet, Russian, Finnish. And now all these documents are at the institute. So, summary very shortly. Finnish migration has a long history, starting from 1638, and the role of the Finns among these Swedes is very, very remarkable. And the Delaware Indians, they have the name Lenape Indians, and they are living in some reservation in Texas nowadays. So when the Europeans came to North America, Indians has to move to west, and the Lenapes are living there. And my colleague told me, I don't have any fact about that, but still the Lenapes, in their language, they have some Finnish words. So it's some example about how the Finns were cooperating with native people.
Like curse is like
Uh,
a P word.
No. Finns and Indians have sauna. They have sauna culture together, and of course alcohol. Sorry, but Finns were very open-minded for native people. The Finns were not living in fortress. They were farming land, and they didn't know how to cultivate the country and earth. So the Indians and the native people helped with the Finns. And the number of Finns and the share of Finns was very lower compared with the Scandinavians, and Finns came 20-25 years later compared with the Scandinavians, working in very demanding works, and that's the one reason that the Finns became radical. Who knows the name Gus Hall? What is the whole name?
He was the
Gustav.
chairman for the Communist Party of America. And he's,
Gustav Hallberg.
yeah. So
So
we have a Hallberg in our family, but it's not
Gus Hall died.
absolutely not related.
Yeah.
Gus Hall, everybody politically knows.
Yeah. So 50% of American communists were Finns, early 1910. And then Finns established several utopian communes and settlements, and America's attraction will fade, at least for now. But what will happen in the future we don't know, but I'm very sure that Finnishness will still remain in the traditional Finnish regions. And tack ska du ha.